Alright everybody, here it is, my Bunkies Are Bad debunking video, otherwise known as the Under Bunkie tutorial, the Mac Daddy of all bunkies, so bunkie up. Now let me just say right off the bat, this is not a sink the uplink into the ground thing, this isn't a seal anybody in thing, this is a totally different strategy, it's very effective, and most importantly for all you sour stones out there, it really is the best of both worlds. So this is the type of thing where you can choose to be inside the bunker, you can choose to be above ground, whatever you want to do. It works out for everybody, and it's a really effective strategy. So anyway, here we go. So the first thing you want to do is put a permanent waypoint on the uplink in the corner that you intend on digging to. The reason for this is you can't highlight it the same way you can the fuel cell, so this is just a reference point that you can use for while underground to determine where you're going. Next, you're going to want to pick out a spot about 15 to 20 meters away from the uplink that you're going to start digging from to make your under bunkie. When you first start doing this, it's important to check your terrain scanner regularly, as you want to stay about 5 meters below the surface. You want to keep the bunkie as shallow as possible so that if things go south, you can get out pretty easily. There's my waypoint. We're 5 meters below, so we're doing well so far. And once you're right beneath the uplink, you'll begin to see the green uplink zone. So you can check your terrain scanner again, make sure you're centered directly beneath it, and check it again maybe to see how close you are to the dropship, because you don't want to cut through that wall. And from there, you can just start building your bunkie. The most important thing here is to stay centered directly beneath the uplink, and again, to not break through that wall. And if you're OCD like me, you can smooth out those walls. And like in the last video, you can make a little foxhole for yourself. And once again, your engineer can place a platform here. Now, I wouldn't put the turret there from the very beginning. I would actually put the turret on the outside of the bunkie, and then once it runs out of ammo, your engineer can call it into the bunkie, place it on that platform, and it'll have been reloaded. Depending where you start the bunkie, it can be a little difficult for your teammates to find, so you always want to mark it. I also like to smooth out the ramp coming into the bunkie, it just makes for a longer sight line. And it's totally optional, but sometimes it's helpful to have your engineer put some platforms across the top to help control the flow of bugs into the bunkie. Alright, now we should be good to go. All we have to do is... There we go. Much better. Anyway. So now we just have to get that uplink repaired, and once the zone appears, you'll be able to see immediately what the difference is with this strategy, and it's right there. So as you can see, the zone appears both above and below the ground. So people that want to be inside the bunkie can be inside the bunkie, and your grumpy gunner friends can shoot their zipline outside and stay out there, do whatever they want. And now your under bunkie is all ready to go. Now there's kind of two schools of thought on what to do at this point. You can either all go inside or you can split the team. And there's pros and cons to both. If everyone goes inside, obviously you have the most concentrated firepower, but it does leave you vulnerable to the dreaded bulky boy. Now it is a shallow bunkie, and the reason I don't even really do escape tunnels typically is that, again, we're only 5 meters below the surface, so unless you're using barb drills, it is a very easy escape. And if your bunkie's wide enough, I've even satcheled the ceiling before to kind of blow the thing and allow at least the scout to zip out when things get really hairy. Now alternatively, if you prefer eyes on the outside, you can split the team. Now if you choose to go this route, how to split the team is kind of a no-brainer to me. Ideally, I think you have the gunner and the scout on the outside. The gunner can sit on a zip line and kind of rain down fire, and the scout can keep an eye out, kind of bulk detonator if one happens to spawn. And on the inside, you would have the driller and the engineer, because between the cryo gun and the breach cutter, that's more than enough firepower to handle anything that's coming into the choke point. And the engineer's prox mines and lures, depending on what you use, are also very useful when inside of the bunkie. Now the con to this approach is that when you split the team, you split the swarm. So rather than everything coming in through a choke point where the flow is manageable, the bugs kind of just do whatever they want, and I've noticed that they tend to go into the bunkie less when the team is split. In all honesty, both approaches do work, and ultimately, as always, it's best for you and your team to figure out which approach works best for you. So here's another example of an under bunkie. I'm doing everything the same way I did it in the first section of the video. This is just out of Has4, so certainly easy enough to not warrant this strategy at all, but still with enough enemies to kind of give you an idea of the flow once it starts going. So once again, just checking the terrain scanner to make sure I know where I'm at. The zone is poking through the ceiling there. And once again, just making sure to be dead center under that uplink and not being too close to the dropship. Now, one thing to note, if you are playing with strangers, it is very important to very thoroughly explain what you're doing while you're doing this, because most people don't seem to understand really until they see the finished product. So a lot of times what will happen is while you're making this room, someone will be above and they'll actually dig the uplink down, which is the opposite of what you want to happen. So just try to be in all talk, or at least chat, and kind of explain what you're trying to do. And once again, once the uplink is repaired, you can take a step back and you can see that you have all the normal space to fight above ground if you'd like, while the entire bunkie underneath is also included inside of the zone. Now, just to reiterate, this method doesn't really impose on anybody. I often see the complaint that bunkers force the entire team to do something they may not want to do, but as you can see here, the driller can manage the swarm alone if they feel like building one of these and no one else wants to participate. Now obviously this is just on Has 4, which I think for a lot of us is easy at this point. You can see that between Cryo, EPC, drills, and Impact Axe, it's pretty easy to handle the swarm by yourself. If you have your cryo cannon set up properly, you should be able to freeze just about anything, even oppressors. I freeze an oppressor, throw an impact axe, freeze again, and then one more impact axe is enough to kill an oppressor on Has 5. Anyway, once the uplink is complete, always give it 10 to 15 seconds just to make sure that there's nothing else coming. Sometimes you're tempted to leave right away, and there's still a big swarm of enemies on the way, so just make sure the coast is clear before you leave. Now if you're really lucky, you can double your pleasure, double your fun, and double your bunkie. This occurs when the fuel cell drops in a location where there is a linear-ish path from the start of your bunkie to the uplink to the fuel cell with no obstructions. This allows you to connect your original bunkie to a bunkie beneath the fuel cell. I mentioned earlier that you can highlight the fuel cell, and that makes the double bunkie a lot easier to construct. Either highlight it yourself or ask a teammate on the surface to highlight it for you. Once underground, you are still able to see the outline, and it makes digging underneath without getting too close to the surface a lot easier. So now you can dig out the double bunkie just as you did the first one. Just make sure again that you're centered underneath the fuel cell and that you're not breaking through any walls. And with that, your double bunkie should be good to go. By now you should have decided as a team who is staying in and who is staying out, but ideally the scout will repair the uplink if everyone is bunkying up, as they can easily zip down once the repair is complete. If you'd like, you can always mark and start an escape route, just in case things really do go south, but again, you're so close to the surface that it really isn't necessary most of the time. So, you fight the bugs and blah blah blah. Now, what's really important is that once the refuel process is done, even more so than when the uplink process is done, you really want to stay inside, because as you see in the top right, you have a pod powering up timer. A lot of times people are really tempted to leave while the pod is still powering up, but especially if the team is all inside of the bunkie, you're in a fortified position, so it really makes the most sense to stay here until the pod is completely powered up and that timer is ended. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here because I want to show one advantage of splitting the team. If you do have dwarves on the outside, they can highlight the dropship for you, which also shows where the ramp is. This way, anyone still inside the bunkie once the ship is powered up can drill directly to the ramp. And that should just about do it. Now I know at the end of the day that even after thoroughly explaining and demonstrating this concept, that some people are still going to shit on it, and that's fine. There are, however, two different complaints that I'd like to address. The first is something I think is an issue with modern discourse in general, which is how so many things are dumbed down to if for, then against. If I'm for making bunkies, I'm obviously against pure combat, and that's definitely not true. My team and I don't always make bunkies, just as we don't always fight on the surface. It's whatever we feel like doing in the moment, which is what is so great about this game, and what brings me to the other complaint. Several people have said, don't you get bored sitting in a hole and shooting while standing still? The answer is, kind of. But it misses the point entirely. What's interesting to me is taking a dead strategy and finding a way to make it work. What's fun about building these is adapting to the terrain and figuring out new ways to make it more effective. It's what attracted me to this game in the first place. You're given general direction and then set loose in a totally modifiable environment. I'll never forget the first time my friend and I were running through tunnels back to the dropship, and I said, I wonder if we could just drill there. This game is great because you can just play it straight and do the objective, or you can get creative and develop your own strategies. The game is what you make it, and that's what I love about it. Rock and Stone.